But that is something that I must say to my people. Marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny.
I was introduced to a gentleman in my dressing room right before the show. Sean Penn brought him by. Introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Craig B. Hulet.
What do you think of the situation? How do you sum it up?
Well, to put it bluntly, since 1964, we've had our Civil Rights Act, and then for the last 20 years, we've systematically lost all of our civil liberties. And this isn't just black people, it's everybody across the board. And it isn't being done in a sense that the media is going to pick up on it. It isn't necessarily being done in statute law. Often it's done with executive orders from the president. And where it stands right here, right now, for the last 10 years, we've lost our exclusionary rule, writ of habeas corpus. Right now, they're talking about, already passed in law, opening 10 abandoned military bases to house first-time drug offenders, illegal aliens, and the homeless. Now, there's no way on earth, to my way of thinking, and I'm a white man here, there's no way on earth, to my way of thinking, that this community of blacks and Hispanics can watch this go down, because primarily the drug and crime bills are being assaulted on that community. Where 80% of white America does the drugs, 70% of the arrests are blacks and Hispanics.
The reason I think some of the information that I've tried to put out is very important to the American people is because 15 years ago I told a friend of mine who later became my press agent that this country would decide its politics on the issue of race. I think that's where we're at today, and I think if we don't do something about it, I think we stand a very good chance of losing this country. I was a consultant to U.S.-based multinational corporations for some 10, 13 years. I worked for Exxon, Weyerhaeuser, U.S. Home, a whole host of giant corporations. L.A., Houston were where my offices were. I later became a consultant to senatorial races. I started an Institute for World Research, published my own newspaper for a time, and had a radio show. I came out of retirement around 1987 or so because it looked like George Bush would become the President of the United States, as he did. I'm not a Democrat. I didn't go after Bush because I'm a Democrat. I'm not. And I'm not going to go after Clinton because I'm a Republican. I'm not. And I'm not a libertarian. I'm an analyst.
I'm Kathy DePass. I'm Craig Hulet's press agent, have been for the past 5 years. I have had a very difficult time getting Craig interviewed since the Democrat took office, Bill Clinton. Previously, when George Bush was president, I had no problem. Over 2,000 hours of interviews. He was their best guest. They called me back anytime something came up, like the Persian Gulf. Craig was called sometimes by these stations 2 and 3 times a week.
Bill Clinton can do things that George Bush could never have gotten away with. Bill Clinton can pass executive orders and nobody will say anything about it because he's just a Democrat. And that's a very dangerous place for our country to be.
They do not want to hear any criticism from Craig, any analysis whatsoever. And I cannot get them to return my phone calls. They want to screen Craig first, and most often it does not end up in an interview.
It's going to be very difficult to address Bill Clinton in a media dominated by Democrats who don't want to hear anything bad about Bill Clinton.
Now, more Talk That's Hot with Mike Siegel.
Thank you very much. 134. Welcome back and good afternoon.
You're one of the few people who gives him a chance to speak. How hard is it to get a guy like him some airtime?
For my program, it's not hard at all. I just make the judgment that Craig Hulet has something to say. It's provocative. It's thoughtful. He certainly researches his material, and I think people do, in fact, appreciate hearing from him. They don't necessarily agree with him, but they get information from him that they can then check themselves, and I think it stimulates people to get involved in the system, and that's what I care about. We have not talked to him since President Clinton became President Clinton, so we thought we would have Casey DePass, also known as Craig Hulet, here to talk with us about some of what he observes about this new president's administration, what he sees about it, and where he thinks it's going to be going. And as always, Craig, it's nice to see you.
Thanks for having me on, Mike.
My pleasure.
Appreciate
Now, let us go forward now to this Clinton administration.
Some of the policies, the less benign policies, the less compassionate policies that Clinton has adopted are in fact some of the hardcore, hardline Bush policies.
To hear about this.
Bill Clinton packs his cabinet with elitists from the same think tanks, the same fraternities, the same brotherhood, if you will, that existed in the Bush administration. Ford, Nixon, Carter, it doesn't make any difference. All Clinton amounts to then is a puppet making policy in a sense that was already made over the last 30 years. He's not really going to change anything. He can't. The American people would have to change it.
That's right. In fact, the first thing we talked about in '88 was the Base Closures and Realignment Commission and the drug war, and callers called in and said we were both crazy.
This man one day will be housed in a military base, whether he likes it or not. Right now, Bill Clinton is telling us that he'll be housed voluntarily. Does he look like he's going to go voluntarily? What do you think about them housing you on an abandoned military base rather than a shack or being out on the streets?
It'd be a lot
More comfortable?
I'll get a shower every day.
Yeah, shower.
Clean clothes and I try to do that anyway, but sometimes it's impossible.
What if they had to make it involuntary? Where you couldn't leave?
Well, they just, no. It'd have to be like putting you in jail, you know?
They planned to close down military facilities before the Cold War was over and start detaining segments of our own population. And I know now, and what I said in '86 has come true. Homeless, illegal aliens, first-time drug offenders was first designated.
The laws are changing to give first-time drug offenders, for instance, 5 years imprisonment, no chance of parole. 70% of the arrests for drug possession, drug dealing, drug trafficking, conspiracy, all of the charges in the crime and drug laws, 70% are black and Hispanic. How am I going to come up to somebody who's in a minority class, a black man, and tell him that in the year 2000 that this is not genocide against his own people? How am I going to tell him that? Tell him that it's not genocide, it's just government policy?
We will stamp out racism by any means necessary, and we sincerely mean that. And if we have to burn this goddamn town and this country down, that's exactly what we're going to do, because there is something very important about human dignity, and that's the preservation of human dignity. And I think that's what the reaction to the Rodney King trial was. It was a preservation of human dignity, and it was a proclamation to say that we're no longer going to be disrespected. And if we have to kick your ass, if we have to burn your ass, that's what we're going to do.
Drug czar Bill Bennett's strategy report, 1989-90. Every category of drug usage, off sharply, down drastically, 2.8 million fewer people use cocaine than ever before. So if it's on the decline and the community's been solving it between 85 and 86, 88, why is there a national emergency? Why do we lose our constitutional rights? And why are the police running rampant, not just in LA, St. Louis, Portland, all over the country? There are people being shot that are guilty of nothing all over this country. Now, how long? You know, I've been predicting 4 years this is going to happen. Not just necessarily in LA, Berkeley, Philadelphia. This thing that happened here was inevitable. I've been predicting it for 4 years. This wasn't about Rodney King.
They see me as one of the few spokesmen that will speak on the issue, and the fact that I'm white actually makes it more credible. A black man would never be able to stand up and say some of the same things I've said, because I'm white. If a black man did it, they would just look at him and say, well, he's just, you know, your typical angry black man, and he's too emotional. They can't say that about me. You know, when I speak out against racism, it's from a white man's perspective, and I think that's who needs to address racism, is white people. I spent a lot of my life doing nothing but research and getting the information out. I'm not doing this for a personal reason. This is not a crusade. I don't feel messianic. This isn't a religious movement. This is more akin to what Jim Garrison and Oliver Stone have done. I'm doing this for history. This is the naval station, Puget Sound, Sandpoint Naval Station. It's been designated for closure for 1995. This is March 1993. For those of you that believe that this is a good idea to house the homeless and drug users here, I think we need to take a note of what Bill Clinton said in a recent speech. In that speech, he defined it differently. He said that non-violent criminals could be housed in shock incarceration centers. They call those boot camps. Ultimately, what we will have is the homeless, drug users, small-time petty criminals, illegal aliens housed on U.S. property, no trespassing. This whole society wouldn't care if this man disappeared off the planet. Mr. Clinton, Mr. Bush, the next president, in all likelihood, will clean up the streets of America. And he will disappear. He'll be a lot more faceless then than the way he is. Look, Bill Clinton was elected with only 43% of the popular vote. That's fewer votes than Dukakis received when Dukakis lost. Bill Clinton said he thanked God for being elected president. He should have thanked Ross Perot. If I don't tell you what's going on in your country, I assure you the major media is not going to tell you what's going on in your country. What saddens me is that one day some president's going to be in the White House and he'll be able to look out across a very white America and say, we've taken care of the homeless, we've taken care of unemployment, we don't have a problem with illegal aliens, and I'm going to have to sit back probably in a rainforest like this, probably in my home, very, very angry, and simply say, of course you've taken care of it. You lock them all away on abandoned military bases. I have children. I'll have grandchildren. Most of you will have children or grandchildren. How are you going to look at them in the face in the year 2000, 2010, when this information that I'm trying to tell you today becomes common knowledge then? They're going to ask you, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you help? Why didn't you do something? They're already saying that.
Hey, ooh, did you ever believe that I could leave you standing out in the cold? Hey, yeah, baby, I know how it feels, 'cause I have slipped through to the very depths of my soul, yeah.
Last night I woke up at 3:30 in the morning. I just woke up. My heart was just slamming. I finally hit. Everything just started to pour out of me. I started crying. It was real strange experience.
Speed.
Now you're purged.
1 second.
Did you see the Rodney King announcement?
Yeah, we only got to see half. They interrupted our feed to lay that into TV too. So it was you and Rodney that they used today.
Told you.
Anytime. Sean.
Okay, we're here with Sean Penn.
Hold on, Sean. I'm gonna have you.
Make sure you get lots of clean one shots too.
You got. I've been to this show before.
Keep your lights over. Thanks.
Oh.
We still have.
My legs
we
will
still
get
have
over
speed.
Well, no, just put the other one over there. Yes, I need to see them on. Thanks. Oh.
Anytime.
All right, we're here with Sean Penn and Craig. Pronounce your last name.
B. Hulet.
Okay. Why are you two together? First of all, we're in a two-shot here, so.
Why don't you start?
We've never seen you two people together before. Why are you here together?
Sean came to one of my lectures. He's heard me on the radio talking serious political issues for the last, well, I've been doing it for 4 years. Sean has heard me over the last year or so. And he just attended a couple of my lectures, and I think it was kind of inevitable that Sean Penn and Craig Hulet finally meet. And I think we're a good duo.
We'll see. Yes. Well, no, I think what happens. I initially heard Craig on the radio on Roy Tuckman's show KPFK in Los Angeles, and what I was hearing was the first time I was hearing something reported in the available media was something that sounded like the truth. I had never been motivated to get involved with things because political issues, because they either were the brainchild of sort of ideologues focusing on result-oriented issues, results as this riot is a result issue, and I think that it's one of the things that happens in the media, because it simplifies what we're talking about when you're talking about something that comes as a result of a much bigger problem. And so it's much easier to focus on the result of things. Craig was the first person I heard talking, I felt honestly and strongly, about the reasons for the things that we see in the headlines. And so then when I got in touch with Craig at one of his lectures, and then we started talking, and I started organizing a couple lectures that he did. And we've been trying to get this information out before something like this happened for the last 6 months or so. And so I suppose that's why we hooked up, and I guess that's why we're sitting here now. Probably pretty angry that we didn't get that message out. We and all the others who've tried.
What were some of the lectures that you organized? Were they here in LA?
Yeah.
Where were they?
On the Sheraton Miramar.
And who was invited?
I invited a lot of people that I knew that I thought would care and maybe care enough to do something about what was happening. And we had put together a sort of the root of an organization to start to put that information out. One of the things that we had intended to do was to go into the areas that are principally affected by this result instance, and make available the information that Craig has gathered through an extraordinary amount of research, I think particularly involving the types of civil rights violations that are being experienced in those areas, and because the law says it's okay, and because the laws that he has tracked has allowed those kinds of violations to happen, and they're not the same. It's not the same way that that they're violated in the better fed community at this time, but they still exist. And if the government becomes too oppressive and people decide to get angry, then those same laws will be used against everybody that's not doing anything and sitting, living comfortable lives.
What were some of the civil rights that you all were talking about early on, not the results, but the civil?
Well, primarily because of the drug laws and the crime bills that have started being passed since 1986. George Bush was made in charge of the drug war in 1982, and because of his extremely powerful influence, and he's an extremely powerful, and I consider a very dangerous man to be in the White House, his input into the laws is very visibly tracked. You can see George Bush's handprint all over the crime bills that are being passed. They began throwing out things like the writ of habeas corpus right, the exclusionary rule, that's your right to privacy from illegal search and seizure. They can now kick in your door and present a facially deficient warrant or a completely fraudulent warrant, and the police will tell you up front, as they've been quoted lately in the press, and they'll simply tell you that it's legal for them to break and enter. And even if they get the wrong house and tear the house up and do harm to people, and in a number of incidents they've actually killed people and they've gotten the wrong house. And the police barely apologize, but you have no recourse because there's immunity for law enforcement written into these laws because they know our fundamental rights are going to be violated, and that's the reason to get rid of habeas corpus, is because the people don't realize that these laws have been passed. So as these things happen, people think they have rights that they already do not have. So when they get arrested, they're going to try to find a lawyer and say, you know, I want my writ of habeas corpus, I want to see a judge. And in a very short amount of time in this country, you're going to find out that you'll be able to sit in jail without any charges for a year and never see a judge. And that's where we're headed. And this is like South Africa justice. And what really makes me angry is the major press knows these laws are being passed, but either they're reading the laws and they don't know how, or they're reading those parts of the laws and not reporting them. But in any case, where we're at today is there's a larger percentage of our black population in jail now in America than in South Africa. 25% of black men in this country currently, today, are either in jail, on parole, or on probation. Now, give this a few more years of their 5-year sentences for first-time drug offense, put it out there 5 years with no chance of parole, go to the year 2000, 50% of the black population will have criminal records. They won't be allowed to vote. Jesse Jackson will become meaningless as a political figure because there won't be enough black people to vote. And I think that's where we're headed unless we take back the country in a very powerful fashion. These fires that are going on right now in LA and throughout the country, I've been predicting this and worse than this for over 5 years on radio, TV shows, and a lot of people have called in and said, you're crazy. Nothing like that's going to happen. It isn't that bad out there. There is crime and drugs, et cetera, and they've missed the point. They've missed the point entirely. They directed their energy first at the inner cities, the minorities, the people who don't have a voice. So the American people, by and large, don't know what those blacks and Hispanics and other people in the inner cities have experienced for 10 years. That's why this erupted. This wasn't about Rodney King. Rodney King was the last effort, their last hope that there might be just even a tiny drop of justice left. And there isn't. It's gone. To get it back, unfortunately, now we have to almost act, and I believe in acting nonviolently, but politically, but we have to take back what's been taken from us. I believe this country has suffered a kind of revolution from the very top to the White House.
And the great danger, I think, in this circumstance is that with the violence, they are potentially playing right into the Bush administration hand. I absolutely understand the hopelessness. I understand why the violence is happening. I think that they've made their point, and they've got and they're going to have to leave it up to their own wills. They're without violence, as well as the reaction of the rest of America that's been sitting by and not doing anything about it, who are going to react to what happens here in two ways. One, they're going to react with anger, and that's good. Anger separated from violence and guided in a right direction and supportive of these people, all of these people, be they the ones helping the firemen holding the fire hoses, or be they the ones that feel so hopeless that they have to break the windows and burn the buildings. Support all of those people and continue it even after it's no longer the hot topic as it is now. And the other reaction is the more dangerous reaction, the reaction of fear. And those people who are in fear are going to vote for, support those candidates and those laws that further violate our civil rights.
Because the laws tend to lock up certain kinds of people?
Yeah, why let this happen? Let's just break into their house so we know they don't have any guns. Now, I have mixed feelings about gun ownership, because guns generally end in problems. But if you take away that right that is given to us, as our rights are given in our Bill of Rights and our Constitution, you're going to take that one away, well, you can bet that you're going to lose another one. So it's about, we've got to find ways to regulate things like that, certainly, but we've got to support our rights, and we've got to find a way to give these people jobs and hope.
So it seems like this is a huge, huge thing we're talking about here. I mean, there are so many things we're talking about. I mean, you're talking about the system is corrupt, okay? There's no hope in the community because there's no jobs, and the education system is bad. How do you take something that is so corrupt and through media maybe talk about it in a lecture, but really, how can we really make it?
We have to do it in a much, much larger sense. Not unlike what I've been doing myself in a smaller scale, independently, it has to be done in a much larger scale. And I mean on a huge scale. Because the way you educate people politically is not tell them to go to a lecture or read a book or take a course in political science. Take a course in political science, you won't know what's going on. The way to affect change from the bottom is to get people kind of at the top. I don't mean at the top like George Bush is at the top, but there's a top level of effective, intelligent, wealthy, powerful, important people that do care about this. And I want to say something just as an aside. When Sean brought me out here, because this is important, when Sean first brought me out to give some lectures, I had a very jaundiced view of Hollywood personalities, period. I wasn't really crazy about Hollywood types, and I wasn't crazy about basically media types, period. I knew the change wasn't going to happen there unless there was an internal change within those things. I have seen, since I've been with Sean, an incredible diversity of people that I would never have thought would be so importantly considered political, but they've considered their positions, thinking it out, and they're very serious, and they're very concerned. And this is white, black, male, female, across the board. And that to me is the most positive thing I've seen in 10 years politically. It hasn't surfaced because the politics of the last 20 years has been about purely the environment, isolated, women's issues, isolated, abortion issues, isolated, each issue isolated, and of course ridiculous issues like tuna fish, cigarettes, smoking in elevators, whatever. The issues that weren't ever going to address our problems. We were talking around it, and everybody was getting politically involved in safe issues, issues that everybody would agree needed to be addressed. Well, this is a very untidy issue. Civil liberties, minority issues, the issue of jobs and the homeless. These are very untidy issues when they're packaged in the context that Washington is completely and almost totally responsible for the demise of our inner cities. They've done this.
And how have they, I know they've done it, let's talk just on tape, how come we have this huge joblessness? How come we have this huge homelessness because of Bush?
It's real simple. For the past 25 years, a certain kind of man has moved into Washington. They hold every cabinet position from CIA director to Secretary of State. The best example, or in my case I feel it's the worst example, is George Shultz. This man has been Secretary of the Treasury, Undersecretary of the Treasury for Monetary Affairs, Secretary of the Labor, and for 8 years under Reagan, Secretary of State. Now this man, to me, symbolizes every cabinet post and now the presidency that we've been living with for 25 years. He's a corporate businessman. Bechtel, the Boeing Corporation. He acts politically as the Secretary of State to open trade in China. He goes to Boeing and is now reaping financial rewards for the largest sales ever by Boeing to China. This is, to me, criminal conflict of interest. He shouldn't be Secretary of State. He should be in jail. Well, George Bush sits on the board of almost 20 major corporations, very influential corporations. Now it's all the way to the top, to the White House. Why is it hurting us? They're monopolists. They're a specific kind of multinational corporate ownership. They're a special kind of breed. These are not free market entrepreneurs. They're like General Motors, lays off 74,000 workers in America, never to be employed again, but the next week they admit they're going to put $2 billion in a new GM plant in Poland. Why? They've saturated the market in America. They are more than willing to abandon American workers to now start paying Polish workers to build GM cars under a Polish name so they can then saturate that market with their cars. In other words, they don't care about us as people in America. Blacks, whites, nobody. It's about making money. And that's happening across the board. 500 major corporations. They want to make money overseas. That's where the big bucks are. And that's been going on for 25 years. This didn't happen overnight. That's why we've systematically lost our employment base, our industrial base. It's disappeared. It's being transferred to the EC, Europe, Japan, Latin America, because that's the right pickings for the monopolists to go in, target the market, and dominate it.
Now, it's going to take, so in order to change this, it's going to take years, okay? It took 25 years for it to happen. So what about this lost kind of generation of people that are maybe not going to recoup? They're going to be in prison, they're going to stay there, or even if they don't stay there, to be re-educated when they're 17 years old and they don't have any education but a third-grade education.
Well, that's upon all of us. One of the things that Craig is talking about, again, how all of that then relates back out on the streets, is that obviously these businessmen who are running the country, and it doesn't take evil people to do the things that they're doing. It takes people who have gotten used to their place in life that they believe gives them the right to lead because they are leading. And therefore, that's the track that they're on. They're clearly near an accomplishment. We have very few nationalistic leaders, and what a coincidence that we go into Iraq where there is a nationalistic leader. What a coincidence that after 500 miles of wreckage from a plane over Scotland, they find something like a wire this big and are able to tie it to 2 Libyan terrorists. Why? Because George Bush wants to go into Libya to win this election. So, an example of what's going to happen is that eventually, and this gets into the hope that I think, if anything, the little hope we might be able to offer these hopeless people is to say this. You have, for example, there would be no such thing as cocaine in this country if it weren't for several major American corporations that the most powerful man, the most powerful men, get it, happens to be on the board of directors of some of these companies. If they didn't supply what are called the precursor chemicals, you don't find these hydrochloric acid in little pools in the South American jungle. It comes in 50-gallon drums from American corporations. Why don't they cut off that supply? which makes cocaine, because you can make arrests, which they don't bother to make the arrests of the majority of the users of the product, which is 80% white America. They bother to make the arrests in the communities where you don't have tax-paying citizens, where many of the citizens are not voters, and you're able to create a scare tactic that allows them to pass firmer and firmer laws. As they get closer and closer to their objective, it's going to start to squeeze the rest of the country. Los Angeles is a little city, and I mean, relative to the globe, and it's spread out and spread out and spread out, this riot. It's the same thing that's going to start to happen in terms of people responding with a backlash to this oppressive thing that is happening. And when it happens, they'll be ready to deal with it, and they'll have done it legally. They'll have achieved it through the fear of this country, allowing them to pass the laws that are going to keep us controlled. And unless we do something about it now, we're in big trouble. And getting back to the tiny bit of hope that I think we can offer these kids that are killing themselves because they've been brainwashed into being a suicidal culture, which is why they're not in Beverly Hills. It's why they're where they are doing what they're doing, is that I can say from our travels, particularly these last few days, that we who are lucky enough to have a nice home and hope and the ability to accomplish certain ones of our dreams that they are not able to accomplish, I have seen what I believe is true anger in those people. And I think that if we take it upon ourselves to be like the spoon that you put in a cup of soup if it's too hot, if we take some of the burden of their anger and find a way with them to direct it and stop fighting about pro-choice or pro-life, and those issues aren't going to mean anything eventually. They're going to be a bunch of smokescreen issues. Those pro-choice, pro-life, or Democrat, Republican have got to start holding hands and saying, we want our country back, and then we'll deal with these issues in a democratic way.
Okay, so how are we going to put the spoon in and help, and how are you going to release the burden?
Well, I think, as in anything, the first thing that you have to do, and what we've been trying very hard to do, and what I hope this tragedy brings attention to, is the information that people don't have. If these kids really knew what they were doing to themselves, they would have found another way to channel what is in fact very positive rage.
Let's give them a really, really clean example of that. There's already been 2 laws passed. Bush hasn't signed them yet because it's an election year. They will be signed next year. There's no question about it, unless the major media, the press, the print medium, gets a hold of it and shows it to the people for what it really is. They want to take, and it's already been passed again in the Senate and the House version of the bill, to take 10 of our military bases that they plan to close down through the Base Closures and Realignment Commission, close these military bases down. We were told it was to save money and cut back the military. Well, the New York Times just reported there's going to be no financial cutback in the budget of the military. Well, I told people when I was doing interviews there will be no cutback because they have plans for those military bases. In 1986, they passed a law to abandon specified bases and facilities so they could in the future turn them into labor camps, boot camps for first-time drug users, the homeless, illegal aliens. They've now passed it in law. Now, the press hasn't reported it because the press doesn't bother to go back and try to read all the way back to '86 the laws that have been passed that bring us to this. They simply accept the press release from the Pentagon, from Cheney's office, that says, we're doing this to save money. And then a congressman a year from now will slap his forehead and he'll say, well, you know what? We've got abandoned bases. Why don't we put the homeless there? That's what D'Amato just did. I've been predicting they would do this because in '86 they planned to do this. So what Sean is saying is all we have to do is get the right kind of information, the truth, if you will, to the people in the street, the people of America. And those people would have directed that anger in a more positive, better profile than what's happening.
So for the last few days, have you been doing this kind of educational circuit?
Well, I've always been doing it.
You, Sean, are you going to continue kind of on an educational circuit? Is that?
Well, yeah. I mean, Craig and I are going to continue working together and try to find the best, most accessible ways of doing it. And I think that it's something that we certainly can't do on our own, and there are a lot of people, as we found out in the last few days, very bright people who are trying to do the same thing that we're trying to do. And so whether we jump on their bandwagon or they on ours, or we all are able to get together. I mean, all these environmental organizations have got together with, you know, the organizations against pro or against abortion, or everybody is going to have to get together and say, we're drowning while we're fighting for one idea, when you have an entirely corrupt system. And it's been enough years of people just bitching and saying, yeah, it's corrupt. And then I think that another important thing is the myth that the government takes care of it. For instance, the myth of Watergate, the myth of Oliver North. This is what the CIA calls letting the steam off the kettle. These are people who, for whatever their own reasons, became expendable. Woodward and Bernstein, whatever their qualifications, did not Watergate Richard Nixon. Deep Throat did. And Deep Throat, I can pretty well guarantee you, was not some Democrat who hated Richard Nixon. But this might have been somebody who was a little upset that he mined Haiphong Harbor and ultimately decided to act like a president, and I'm not a fan of Richard Nixon, and end the Vietnam War, a very profitable enterprise. And so when we then think that, you know, that good prevails and Richard Nixon is out, or good prevails, who cares about Oliver North? Let's get to the guys that ordered him to do what he did. And we're not going to get to them until we all get together and do something. Rodney King put it pretty well today. You know, let's get together. And I think people are finally getting to the point where they're ready to do that. And I hope that gets out to the streets, and that they feel that, for better or for worse, they made their point, and we can take this horrible thing that's happened and turn it against those who have been saying to themselves the last few days, this is just what we need.
What about getting the information seriously getting into the streets, though? I'm talking about schools and
I think
places
that
like
it is happening. Well, all my white papers and tapes of my lectures are already in the library at Soledad Prison. And the prisoners requested them. They listen to radio talk, strange as it seems.
No,
it happens. It's happening all over the place. It's happening the way it needed to happen. At least, you know, the way I was doing it. It had to happen from the people. It has to come from the people. And I feel very good about what I've been doing the last few weeks, and especially today, or to what I just told somebody on the phone today. I've had my hand shake now by more black men since going back to when I was in Vietnam. I've made more friends that know that this is not about black or white. This is about a man here and a man there, a woman here and a woman there. It doesn't matter what their color are. If we all agree that we're human beings, and this must stop. The violence must stop, but not the anger. That's one of the things I leave most of my lectures with is I don't give a tidy lecture. I'm a very angry man. I'm very calm right now for this interview, and I'm going to stay angry the rest of my life. And I tell my audience, don't ever come to my lecture and expect me to be positive. Right now, there's nothing positive except the fact that you've come here. And that's the way it is right now. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to remain angry. This isn't going to be fixed because the fires stop. Bush sent the Marines in.
Right. I mean, you had throughout history, people making documentaries, people speaking, people on KPFK radio. Everybody has always known what's going on, but we have not been able to raise up enough people. I mean, there's a huge apathetic group of people that just represent your common person who just wants to get home and watch television, the Cosby Show, whatever, and just go to bed and make love and whatever.
Yeah, you've got a little bit different situation now. The Gulf so-called war proved that we have to be very careful of how the media treats the things that happen.
Good stuff.
I was a student body president at my high school, and I could like get a certain percentage of people to vote at the high school, and that was just how it was.
I get to do my apathy thing on tape.
All right.
My apathy thing.
Apathy. I think that most people are apathetic. They want to escape these fires and just finish them and be done so they can go back out shopping and watch television.
Okay, there's always going to be a tiny percentage of all race, colors, and creeds, all human beings. They're going to be apathetic. But the American people, by and large, are not apathetic. That isn't what you're seeing in the American people. What it is arrogance, an incredible arrogance. And the arrogance comes from being ignorant politically. They don't know what's going on politically, but ask them. They'll all tell you they do. They all have a reason for whatever's going on. They'll tell you they know. Everybody believed in America that they knew what was going on in the Persian Gulf. They knew nothing. Bush lied to us from day one, but the Americans were out, 80% of them, as though they knew what was going on geopolitically in foreign affairs. They knew nothing. They're ignorant of what's going on. That translates into arrogance. It looks like apathy. It's very tricky. It looks like apathy. Back into their Buick or kick their dog and see how apathetic they are.
Well, their anger is not being directed, up until now. I mean, I don't know why now is going to be different, except for the fact that a lot of people are losing money right now. It's affecting everybody. Middle-class people are not as wealthy as they used to be. I mean, I just don't know for sure why things.
Well, if the media cared, really did care.
I will always be part of it. I'm not talking about me because I want you guys to know. I know a lot of people who just.
As the average anchor woman and anchor man, news guys on television, if they really cared about what was going on in this country, they would have bothered to do some homework themselves before this thing erupted. And then they wouldn't have been sitting there throughout the fires and the looting saying ridiculous things like, I don't understand why those kids broke that jar and are eating those dirty gumballs. They can't taste good. I mean, this is insane. It's not about the looting. That was never about looting.
Well, there's no history in news. They're just to report right this second. They don't ever go back. It's not historical.
It doesn't mean you don't read politically.
But what is historical is that the American people can rise up. There was a civil rights movement. We need another one, but this time it can't be a few whites helping a lot of blacks and led by a very few black leaders that are easy to target, and they take out Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Bobby Kennedy, bang, bang, bang. It's got to be a multiracial, bipartisan, because in fact, bipartisan is a term that is really archaic, because in fact we only have one party, Democrat, Republican. There is no line between them anymore, and everybody is going to have to join and do something. And I do feel that unless we drop the ball, by we I mean everybody that is feeling angry about this, and if everybody that feels scared educates themselves or is helped to get educated and turns that fear into anger, then we can affect a change and really do something about it and get the people who are doing the looting working, give them jobs, give them some sense of their own humanity that we owe them.
So we're ripe for a revolution, is what you're saying.
We're ripe for, all we need is, to begin with, is a consciousness revolution, and that will then, it'll take care of itself from then on, because once people know, they'll do something about it. They'll be willing to give up their turf-conscious, little singular idea-based fights and join together and really do something and change the structure of this almost void constitution that we have and bring it back to what it started out to be, protecting the rights of the people governing themselves.
See, when I think of a grassroots movement, like you mentioned, I don't think of, poor people or unemployed people or lower middle class people. Grassroots to me is anybody that's an American that cares about what's going on. I don't see any difference between a wealthy businessman sitting down in a meeting with some poor black gang members, because trust me, I was in the business world for 13 years. The businessmen may know their business, but politically, social issues, the consciousness that Sean's talking about, there's no greater consciousness because people earn money. Not even Hollywood stars have a greater consciousness than people in the street. All we have to do is find all of those people that actually care about the right things, not just themselves. And this is what I always also end my lectures with. This is about only one thing. It's about caring about other people, not caring about yourself. So when I've been called a cynic, that can't possibly be true. I'm not self-interested. I'm asking people to care about something other than themselves, other people. This isn't about me. This isn't about Sean. It's about other people. If everybody would just start acting on that impulse, this wouldn't have happened.
Right. No, if people had put themselves in somebody else's shoes, clearly this wouldn't happen. That's the big problem. No one can live or understand anybody else. But, Sean, I was going to ask you about your son. How old is your son?
My daughter?
Your daughter.
She's a year old.
A year old. Is this give you any insight into like the raising of your child? Does this hit you at all in terms of children, in terms of now that you're a new father? I mean, is there anything that you're changing, you being affected by him? Was there any relationship in having a child?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that a lot of it was timing also, because of hearing something that I could actually listen to and actually believe about was that being the work that Craig has done, to start paying attention to these things happened at a time where I think things meant more to me than they ever have before, because of having a child that's just at the beginning, and we're in the 11th hour if we don't do something.
People are saying that LA's a third world country. They love to say this right now. And do you have any problem with raising your child here, your daughter?
Well, if George Bush has it his way, there's not going to be worlds 1, 2, and 3. There's going to be one world controlled by maybe 3,000 elderly white businessmen, and that's it. And they might want to play it off as a utopia, but in fact, you can't have a utopia run by monopolists. So I'll play it as it goes, I suppose, relative to where and how I raise my daughter. Right now, I think that I'm not willing to give up on this country. I think this country has the opportunity to be the greatest example to other countries. And it's up to the people of the country, and not the present administration, to do something about it. And I think it's important, it is important that people get out and vote. And it doesn't matter if they vote, it doesn't matter who they vote for, as long as they vote for a change. It doesn't matter if they vote for, I don't care if they vote for David Duke on a write-in, as long as they don't vote for George Bush. Let the business world that's running the show know that we ain't happy with it this way. Let them know. And George symbolizes it. Let's say goodbye to him.
Don't you see the politics and the corruption also in the ocean, like you surf, and the fact that probably when you were younger surfing here, it's a different ocean than it was 20 years?
I got to drive 70 miles further north if I don't want to get a staph infection. All the guys I grew up with are getting staph infections. You know, I lost a friend to melanoma because there's nothing between the sun and the earth now to filter out the ultraviolet rays. Of course it's changed, but I don't believe that for instance, this is an example of a single issue politic. If you spend your life as an environmentalist, that's better than most people are doing. And so power to you for doing something. But I think it's important for those people to understand that, and a lot of people have been working at that a lot longer than I've been doing anything. But I think we all have to just say, okay, we've got another issue that's going to make that better that we got to deal with, and it has to do with this global empire that's being sought to the deficit of all of us, because I don't believe presently that the American people are going to do anything about the environment in a massive way until the crap is coming under their door and the spacesuits we've all been issued don't work anymore.
To me, the whole problem is an environmental issue. I mean, the environmental issue is just too small. It should all be ecological. It should all be environmental. The environmental movement is starting to take in an understanding that politics and social justice are part of their cause. They have to.
I'd like to say what I say about this, exactly the same thing. I mean, I'm an environmentalist. I've always been an environmentalist, and I've always loved animals a great deal. I live in the rainforest. That's how environmentalist oriented I am. But I don't choose to live in this country, even if we clean up the environment, if all of my black brothers and sisters are in jail. We've accomplished nothing. Yes, we breathe clean air, and the clean air will be breathed by 50% of the adult black males sitting in Soledad prison. Enough already. We've got to care about people too. So rather than saying it's an environmental issue, I think change the language. It's an organic issue. And it includes the environment, people, civil rights, politics. It's organic.
I interviewed kids at Dorsey High, which is around Crenshaw, and I said, what does the environment mean to you? They said, walking out of my house and not getting shot. I said, does it mean clean air? They said, sure. It also means it's not just animal rights, it's human rights. You know, the kids really understood that.
What grade was that?
This was 11th graders,
yeah.
Documentary I did. So they are looking for that environment to mean more, you know.
Those are good signs. Now all we need is
This was 3 years ago.
This is a good sign, and all we need now is new leaders to make that happen, to bring those people together, make them be political enough, not to give up your life for politics like I have. I wouldn't ask anybody to do that. I mean, that's like going to prison. But I believe we need some new leaders, and I think the old leaders need to step down or at least step back into the background a little bit, because this is the 90s, and politics is absolutely for all time change. George Bush uses the word New World Order so he doesn't have to explain to the public what he means by it. He says it's about peace, justice, and democracy. It isn't about anything like that. The New World Order has nothing to do with it. It's an empire. It's about money, power, politics, mostly profit in monopoly enterprise. And they don't give a rip about the physical environment, the oceans. They don't care about any of those things, except to the point when it becomes detrimental in a cost-effective kind of golden mean on their profit margin, on their graphs, when it shows that it's beginning to affect their own profit, their bottom line, then GE and DuPont will care about the environment. But as long as it's not affecting it, they're not going to.
You know, and these new leaders are not going to come before this consciousness revolution, because if they do, they'll go the way of John F. Kennedy. We can't depend on a leader. If he doesn't have the support of the people, he will be removed one way or the other. But if he does have the support of the people, and we are able to ultimately get somebody who can affect the change in, then we can't stop because he's there. We've got to stay there and stay in support, because it's like the French say, if you don't do politics, politics will do you.
What about any boycotts? Can't we, some of these 20 corporations, can't we do something?
Well, there's some
like
argument.
When we didn't ride the bus?
Boycotts, you know, it's doing something. You know, I never criticize anything that is solution oriented, that's an attempt to do something. But in the end, you know, you have to face the reality of what we're living with. I mean, I've heard people, you know, let's not buy a GE product. Well, GE can beat a boycott real simple. They lower the price of their products. People's self-interest comes into play. They buy the products anywhere. They just take the label off so their neighbor doesn't find out. Boycotts just are not going to be effective, because the companies that are trying to dominate our economy link up with the companies dominating French, German, Japanese economies. They have one interest in mind, and that's monopoly control. If they're a monopoly, and this goes the way George would like it to go, the year 2000, 2020, there will only be one car to buy from one person. So if you boycott it, it means you ain't driving nothing. So, you know, boycotts to me are things to talk about when there's enough people to make it happen. Right now, I don't believe there's 10 million fully conscious adults in America that are not ideologues. Marxist, socialist, free enterprise, utopian, anarchist, little ideologies. You eliminate those people, and I don't think there's 10 million people in this country that are on top of it enough to do a boycott and make it effective yet.
Where do we get the white papers? How can people know how to get some of this material?
The simplest way is to call my press agent. I live up in Seattle area. It's 206 area code 288-2652.
Okay. And film. Anything we can do in film, movies that can be written, you think that's effective?
Absolutely. I think that Oliver Stone proved that that's effective.
Yeah.
Whatever criticisms anyone has had about that film, there's no doubt but that this movie began to do something in a very big way in terms of giving people courage to talk about what's happening, to think about what's happening. So if we can get a few more Oliver Stones, we'll be in a lot better shape.
You're the director.
Well, let's,
I think we need to do all those things.
Until I do it, it means nothing.
Gotta get you some good scripts.
So we all got to do it, whatever it is that we are able to do.
You read a lot, you probably hear about a lot of scripts out there. Have you seen anything coming up?
Absolutely. The actor Tim Robbins has just made a film that I have not seen, but it is something that he wrote that I think it's called The Times, or They Are a Changin' Back, that certainly in a very ironic way addresses these things. Anyway, yeah.
Being on the road script-wise, do you think there's a fervor going on?
I think the main thing to talk about movies for a second, the main thing in movies is that I think more and more, some of the more successful movies are generally nihilistic movies, and the only real responsibility I think filmmakers have, if they choose to do issue movies or political movies, and they do them well and dramatically and artfully, that's great. That's what Oliver Stone did. On the other hand, I don't think that's the obligation of the filmmaker. I think the obligation of the filmmaker is in the spirit of a movie, that it encourages, that it shines a light on the possibility for change. And if people can come out of a movie with that, let it register subconsciously, let them become part of what I think will happen, a consciousness revolution, and take that extra little thing in the back of their head that they might have gotten out of a movie, and use that to get by feeling that nothing can change.
Do you think that the people that are behind you in terms of your PR and your agents and everybody, do they understand or like what you're doing right now?
I haven't got a clue.
Don't care. No, doesn't even know. What happened, last thing is, what happened when you're driving down Manchester? I got it on tape, I think. We got that whole thing. Okay. You had a shopping cart thrown at your window.
Mm-hmm.
And this was before everything happened.
This was the first night of the breakout.
Okay. I got it on tape. It's okay. All right. Is there anything that you want to say that I haven't said?
I guess I could say something, because hopefully some people will get in touch with me. I have to tell people up front that for the last 12 years I've been considered by some as probably the most pessimistic analyst in the country. I mean, I'm just flat sounding negative sometimes, but the last year I've gotten more new hope, and I felt better about political action and its possibilities than I have in 12 years. And that's because people, it isn't just because Sean Penn's a filmmaker and other people are involved in talking about it. I've also seen a change in the attitudes of just people. People come to my lectures that have never had a political thought in their life, and they're coming 200-300 at a time now. That's incredibly positive. That's because subconsciously, like Sean said, you can reach the subconscious. They know something's wrong, very wrong in this country, and they look at George Bush as he acts out his Pee Wee Herman imitation, and they say, this man's not going to tell me the truth. Is Bill Clinton going to fix it? And I explain, why would black people, for instance, vote for an Arkansas governor? I mean, I can't fathom this myself. So it's real simple to me. People are seeing the problems. God knows they're seeing a problem in Los Angeles right now as a symbol of how bad it is in this country, and that's what that should be looked at. To me, that's as bad as it is. It's a sign for people to look at that, by God, something has been wrong a very long time. And they know it. Now they're starting to look for answers, and that hasn't happened for a very long time in this country.
Well, what's great about this is that it isn't one cause. It's the whole, or it's wonderful, because now, now people, whatever problems they have, can join into one, huge consciousness, as opposed to, I don't want to see an abortion happen, or I want to see some green trees be
Yes, and I think if it starts to happen, that that we can, to some degree, depend on the evolution of the human mind and also the evolution of the media that we have to be wary of. But I think that, you know, when we got into Vietnam, which, whether it was intentional or not, sort of systematically transferred the civil rights movement of the 60s from the streets of this country into the jungles of Vietnam, that was a conflict that followed a rah-rah war in Germany and around the world, and then a pay no attention war in Korea. So sucked in. I don't think we'll get sucked in again. We can get sucked in long enough for them to kill 300,000 people in Iraq, but I think that even that, we look at his 80% rating of that time, I think people have had a chance to think about what we did and why we might have done it, and they don't feel so good about it anymore. And I think that if they try to do something like that, it's going to backfire this time.
Thank you.
Regular programming will not be seen, so we may bring you the following special presentation.
My name is Mike Siegel. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to ask the question, did the media in this country accurately cover the Los Angeles riots, or did they create misperceptions among the American people? We're going to pursue this in depth with some video from those riots so you can be the judge firsthand. One of the people who had a lot to say about this was Sean Penn, the actor. Sean Penn was on the streets of Los Angeles during the period of the riots. Let's see what Sean Penn had to say subsequent to those riots about the media coverage.
I do feel that unless we drop the ball, by we I mean everybody that is feeling angry about this, and if everybody that feels scared educates themselves or is helped to get educated and turns that fear into anger, then we can affect the change and really do something about it and get the people who are doing the looting working. Give them jobs, give them some sense of their own humanity that we owe them.
Quality is hard to find, but not at the Antique Warehouse. Investing in furniture and other appointments for your home or office is an important decision. We all know the value of antique pieces and the pleasure they bring us. There's no finer selection of quality antiques than that available at the 15,000 square foot showroom of the Antique Warehouse. Here you'll find that special and unique living room set, or the unusual dining room you've been searching for. Perhaps it's a quality bedroom suite you need. In addition, there's a vast selection of individual furniture pieces and unique items such as antique jukeboxes, office furniture, and even Coca-Cola machines. You may simply have an interest in browsing to find that special item when you see it. The Antique Warehouse is the place. They're known for only the finest quality in antiques, and they travel the world to find the best for you. The Antique Warehouse, in the heart of Seattle's waterfront, right across from the Seattle Aquarium. Open 7 days a week.
Craig Hulet is also known as K.C. DePaz. He's a political analyst and a political consultant. He's been following public issues for 2 decades. He looks behind the issue to find out what really motivates issues to happen. Craig was in Los Angeles during those riots. Craig, it's good to see you. How are you today?
Very good.
Why did you go to Los Angeles during those riots?
Well, why? Sean Penn invited me. Him and I have known each other for some time from a political standpoint, and he immediately flew me down as soon as the riot started, and we stayed in South Central during the riots, going around trying to talk to the people that were on the streets. We talked to police, fire department personnel, and we tried to find the media, and by and large we couldn't find the media on the streets where we were. But that's the reason I went down. The real reason, I think, for me, was I've been predicting that this was going to happen for a long time, for 4 years, on your radio show, all over the country. Something like this was bound to happen. This was inevitable. This was not about Rodney King or 4 police officers getting acquitted. That was just the last straw. The black community, the Hispanic community, is fed up, and that was the last straw for them. They expected one small taste, just a small amount of justice, to at least see Powell go down for the count, for at least too much force used, beating Rodney King. It didn't happen, and they've been angry for a long time, and that's something I think the media really failed in portraying, was how angry those people were, not about the trial and the acquittals, but how angry they were for a very long time, for decades, the way they've been treated by the police, the way the system has treated them. That's what this was about. This wasn't about looting.
And yet the looters and the rioters, arguably, according to many people across this country, were criminals and knew very little about Rodney King, that they weren't even involved in that issue. What would you say to that?
Well, it's obvious to me that as the thing went down, the thing itself went down with Rodney King, and the acquittals came down, that there was a spontaneous outburst, and there was a lot of people that took advantage of it. I'm not rationalizing or trying to apologize for the looters. Of course there was a criminal act, but there was something more behind the looting, and I think by focusing on the looting, we're ignoring the problem in its entirety. And if we choose to do that, and this is one thing Sean and I found out, if we choose to ignore the causes, the anger, and the underlying reasons why these people were so angry that they would burn down their own community this way, which was a logical outcome. This wasn't an irrational act. It was a logical outcome, the same way you or I might get angry at a domestic dispute and we break our own dishes. We don't go to the neighbor's house and break dishes. We get angry. It stays internal. It's about that community. If we ignore it, if we choose to just call them thugs and criminals and looters and ignore all the rest of it, this is not only going to happen again, but we were told over and over again, Sean and I, over and over again, this is going to happen again. This was just a wake-up call.
Did the media act irresponsibly, in your view, by not covering that element of this story the way they should have?
Yes, I think that it was incredibly irresponsible. In fact, it's the worst-case scenario of what I've always believed to be a reasonably moderately liberal media, anchor people, reporters, stepping over the bounds of reporting and making comments throughout, like Sean Penn mentioned at that press conference, the tape you just showed. The coverage was appalling. It was constantly this hand-wringing, why are they stealing TVs? Why are they burning their own buildings? I don't understand what's wrong with, quote, these people. That was on constantly like that. And all it was an incessant focus out of ignorance by the media about some black people that got angry, when in fact the reality was, and you'll see this in a minute in another videotape, the reality was there was as many white people down there looting and burning and rioting. Hispanics. We even saw some people with yarmulkes, so I assume they were probably Jewish. This was not something that was about Rodney King. That was the last straw. And the media should have known that. All you got to do is drive through Compton before the riot.
Are you justifying the criminal activity?
No. No, I'm not even apologizing for it. I think it was wrong that they did it, but there's a logical, rational reason for why it all took place, why a thing this large exploded in one of our own cities.
Now, you're saying that there were as many white people doing the looting and that the media did not portray that, correct?
Correct.
Then let's take a look at that videotape now and see what that was all about as well. Craig, what could the media have done differently? Are you suggesting that what we just saw indicates that there was equal representation of all groups? It wasn't primarily African-Americans involved in that rioting?
Well, I think they could have done that. I don't think they were looking to do that. I think what they were doing was out of utter ignorance about the causes and effects, and rather than acting as just reporters and reporting everything in context, they would focus on things, like Sean pointed out earlier.
Did the media start with the assumption that this was an African-American who was beaten by the police, and therefore it was an African-American issue, and that's why they focused on African-Americans?
Exactly. And in fact, they're still focusing that this is a black issue, and this has never been a black issue. This isn't an issue of race or color or creed. This isn't even an issue, like I said, about the law at this point. This issue is about right and wrong. These people feel, all of these people, the whites down there, the Hispanics, everybody that lives in that community has felt the heavy blows of batons for a very long time. This is not new to them. This was a response to years of violence perpetrated against them. They're awaiting for justice.
The real question, though, is whether what we just saw is representative of what happened, or whether that's just a small focus on some white people involved, and that the large picture still involves the minorities.
Well, what I can say is, you know, I was down there for the entire period of time with Sean Penn in his car. He lost a windshield. It was incredibly violent, and he did lose his windshield by a black perpetrator with a shopping cart. But like I said, Sean and I were down there for the entire time. We tried to find the media, to try to talk to the media about focusing more on the issues that were underlying this, that caused this to happen, not about Rodney King, and there was no media to be found. Sean and I saw too many whites, too many Hispanics, too many Asian, too many all kinds of people down there. This was an outburst from an entire community.
And you don't think that the media represented that cross-section of people accurately?
No, to this very moment, people like Rush Limbaugh, the news media that's handling it right now, everybody is talking about as though it is a black issue for South Central.
Well, then when we come back, we'll take a look at some of the underlying causes of the Los Angeles riots. What really led to that massive insurrection by large numbers of people? Stay with us. Much more to come.
During the Jack Roberts 4th of July Spectacular, free Orange Crush or Hires root beer, free Wrangler smoked franks, and free American flag.
Colossal prices on everything at all 5 stores, including Frigidaire washers and dryers, Frigidaire refrigerators, and Frigidaire ranges.
0 down and no payments till October, or use your bank card.
Everything is on sale. 4 days only, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
A real Jack Roberts 4th of July sale.
There's more to us than I won't be undersold.
Let's face it, I can think of funnier things than going to the doctor for an annual exam. But did you know that your need for regular Pap tests increases with age? In fact, 1/4 of all new cases of cervical cancer occur in women aged 65 and older. Now Medicare helps pay for regular Pap tests, so be tested regularly. You owe it to yourself.
For more information on Pap tests, call 1-800-4-CANCER.
Freedom Fair in Tacoma is a great place to see a spectacular fireworks show. But also this 4th of July, look to the skies for the UPS Next Day Air Show. See a unique showcase of amazing aerobatics. The Soco Jet, the Cyclone, the B-17 Flying Fortress, the Biggles Comedy Air Show, and more. And the best part is, it's free. The UPS Next Day Air Show, all a part of Tacoma's huge Freedom Fair celebration. Brought to you in part by KTZZ-TV, the Big ZZ.
Was the Rodney King incident really the cause of the Los Angeles riots? Or were there underlying causes? Did something else lead to that problem? Craig, did something else lead to that problem?
That's primarily the reason Sean flew me down to attend the riots and also to give a lecture. I gave a 2-hour lecture in South Central to the South Central community just a few days after the riots kind of quieted down. And Sean and I held a press conference. The reason Sean wanted me to do these kinds of things is I've been talking about this for over 5 years in the media in different capacities, as you know. And one of the things that I've been pointing out, especially to the Hollywood audience just recently, is that we're losing our civil liberties because of drug and crime bills. We've lost our writ of habeas corpus. In a certain degree, it's been reformed. We've lost the exclusionary rule. They've reduced things like probable cause to good faith of officers. And as the Los Angeles police never fail to inform the public, they can legally break and enter. They do not have to present a warrant. They do not, in fact, they can present a facially deficient warrant and get away with it. And people have been harmed, and some people have been killed all over this country by those kinds of police brutality. The point is the crime and drug bills is an enforcement arm. This is the law and order doctrine of President Bush. Bush has been in charge of the drug war since '82. What's going down in our loss of constitutional rights, and you're a lawyer, you've got background, you know that as you take away these kinds of rights, the place it affects first is the inner cities, the blacks, the Hispanics, the poor people, the people on the lowest rung of our ladder. They get hit first when these kinds of laws are thrown out the window. That's what has been boiling over for a decade in South Central and all over the country, is those kinds of brutality that's legal now for the police to perpetrate, not just against blacks, but against anybody in this country anytime they choose to. We've lost our country to a certain degree. These people are aware of it in that inner city.
Was this an excuse, the Rodney King incident, for all of these other underlying hostilities about so-called loss of constitutional rights?
I wouldn't say it's an excuse. I think, like I said earlier, and that Sean has pointed out also, that what it is they expected a little bit of justice after a decade of injustice, just a little bit of justice, not just about jobs and unemployment and bad schools, but justice. This isn't the first time a Rodney King has been beaten. I talked to 20 people down there within just a 24-hour period that the same thing had happened to them. And I will also point out it has happened to myself on an occasion 6 years ago, that kind of police brutality. It's happening all over the country. It just never gets on videotape. What they wanted was to see a justice system that would work one time to stop one cop from getting away with this, and they didn't get it.
All right, well, then we're going to take a look at some of the film of what was, in effect, a lecture on your part, and some people who responded from South Central Los Angeles, right? These are the people in the community.
Right.
Pretty angry people.
Instead of a Q&A like I would normally do at the end of a 2-hour lecture, I turned the microphone over to South Central residents, which I felt the media ought to have done instead of selecting people that would whine about looting, selecting black people that would whine about looting.
Well, then let's see the reality of what those people had to say at that lecture in South Central Los Angeles.
I think that white America has still missed the point. And I think that what black people are telling white America is that we're no longer going to tolerate racism. And we will stamp out racism by any means necessary, and we sincerely mean that. And if we have to burn this goddamn town and country down, that's exactly what we're going to do, because there's something very important about human dignity, and that's the preservation of human dignity. And I think that's what the reaction to the Rodney King trial was. It was a preservation of human dignity, and it was a proclamation to say that we're no longer going to be disrespected. And if we have to kick your ass, if we have to burn your ass, that's what we're going to do.
Craig, there's some awfully angry people there. Gentlemen talked about the real perpetrators. Who are the real perpetrators of their problems?
Well, the one thing I found out by talking with these people in a real give and take, and allowing them a great deal of time, is that they were articulate, they were very well read. Many of them were a lot more aware about political issues than a lot of white people I know and a lot of business people I've known over the years. I think what you saw, and that could only be a soundbite, but that was 2 hours of people showing their anger because of their hopelessness, frustration, the fact that they can't even get a loan to open a business. They've been in that community. The Koreans have come into that community, and there is a certain racial overtone there between the blacks and the Koreans.
Who are the perpetrators? Define them.
In the end, the belief down there is that it's the largest multinational corporations, the CEOs and directors that are selling out the inner cities to transfer jobs overseas. That was in part the content of my lecture also, because they are, to a great degree, absolutely correct. The blacks are the last to be hired and the first to be fired.
Very quickly, is there an underlying implicit threat in all of this?
Oh, I think there's definitely a threat. The one thing everybody made very, very clear is that because the media and the white population of America is not addressing this at all, didn't come down and talk to them, this ain't over yet. This is just the beginning.
Well, it is just the beginning, and what we're going to do when we come back is talk about what role the media can play in accurately portraying the problem and dealing with the issues head-on instead of avoiding those. Stay with us. We're going to come back with a lot more for you.
Saturdays on the Big ZZ. A full 5 hours of shows that know no bounds. Hollywood backstage. Very scary stuff. Big burly men in spandex. The man your mother warned you about. And videos you'll never see on MTV. Totally irreverent TV. Saturdays from 10 to 3 on the Big ZZ. Brought to you by Seattle Music.
Because it's your time, your money, your future. You need a guide to today's complex business world. Fast, early, before you start your business day.
Good morning and welcome to this morning's business.
From the boardrooms to the assembly lines, who's leading the pack and who's bottoming out.
Now for a final look at today's top stories on the economic front.
Wherever the changes are taking place, your business future begins with this morning's business.
Weekdays at 6 a.m. on the Big ZZ.
Since we've defined some of the problems underlying the Los Angeles riots, maybe we ought to talk about solutions. Maybe we ought to talk about getting together. Craig, from what you saw in Los Angeles, is it feasible for us to, in effect, get together?
I saw a real effort on the part of a lot of people. A lot of people drove down. For instance, there's a young man, a white man, that drove down from Santa Barbara, and he drove down in part because he heard me on a radio show and came down to attend the lecture and the press conference. It's a very touching and emotional kind of scene for him, because he wants to try to make it clear to the blacks in South Central that he doesn't feel the way they think most whites feel about blacks. And we saw a lot of that. A lot of whites came down to South Central just less than a week after the rioting, which took great courage for them to drive down to South Central to attend a lecture. Maybe they felt safe because Sean Penn was there, I'm not sure. But I think the real point was there began in that room to be a kind of unity forming between whites, blacks, men, women, all kinds of people, because they knew, and they constantly made the point, this is not a black and white issue. This is a right and wrong issue. What went on with Rodney King and the looting, it was wrong, yes, but there's something big going on here. And this is either going to be a great opportunity for people to get together and start communicating, or we can continue hating and dividing it up and referring to the looters as those people down there.
And yet there are many people across this country in prominent positions who would argue that we have become more polarized racially, that there is more separation of the races as years have gone by, rather than more of bringing people together. If that's the case, how do you overcome that? Because you're talking about a comparatively small number of people in Los Angeles.
A small number of people at a very intense moment in a very dangerous area speaking the truth, and I think that's significant. I think what we're looking at in a larger context is a country that has been, to a degree, purposely divided by the federal state authorities. There's a certain interest involved to keeping the blacks and whites divided as people, to keep white people thinking of black people as those people.
Do you think underlying that blacks and whites want to get together, but they're being forced apart by some larger manipulative scheme?
I wouldn't say a larger manipulative scheme. I think what I would say is that America has moved way to the right, incredibly far to the right, and we're moving farther every day. You know this. I know you know this, Mike. And it's getting more and more difficult to get out a message talking to whites and blacks about talking to each other. But I saw too many good developments. White businessmen met until midnight with myself, Sean, and a group of black business leaders in a hotel room, in a conference room.
Then let's answer the question now. Is it possible for all of us to get together to solve this problem?
I came down here. I've never been here before in South Central. Seen it on TV, but that's not the same thing. I can tell you that, I mean, if I told you that I didn't have any fear coming down here, I'd be lying. But I'll tell you one thing. I'm not going to be afraid to come down here anymore. I'm not going to be afraid of a person of color in a dark alley. I refuse to think that all Japanese people can't drive. I refuse to laugh at Arab jokes.
One gets the sense, Craig, from watching those people that there is hope, that people do want to change their attitudes, they do want to get involved with each other, and they do want to solve this problem and coexist peacefully. You were there. You saw what happened. Is that tape reflective of that attitude?
Yes, it was also that attitude on the street. As Sean pointed out, there was as many people trying to stop the looters, both blacks and whites, as there were people looting. This wasn't about looting. There was a lot of compassion shown on the street during the so-called rioting. We focused, because we have a predominantly white society, white media, we chose to focus, and it was a matter of choice. The camera angle, Sean called it. It's a matter of choice how you view a certain particular incident such as this. We chose to look at it in black and white as the issue, and not in a broader perspective. Now, if we continue doing that, this is going to deteriorate, and I guarantee you, I'll make a promise to you, it's going to be worse in the future. It's going to be incredibly bad. These people are very angry. They're not going to get over it by lighting a candle and having a peace vigil. They want the problems addressed.
What will address the problems? What do they want? What can be done?
Well, I think what needs to be done is, in a sense, what I was trying to accomplish when I went down there. I think we need, as a people, as a nation, as political leaders, media, we need to go into those communities all the time on a regular basis and talk to these people, not pick and choose who we want to hear from and edit it so it sounds like how we want it to sound, but go down and talk to these people. These are not stupid people. This isn't the 60s. They don't need a handout. They want to communicate and do business, work within this community, whites and blacks. They don't need Big Brother handing them a welfare check, patting them on the head, and telling them, now behave yourself. That's not going to work. These people are too angry.
We have an economic problem in this country generally. It's not just a racial matter. We are losing jobs overseas. That's not a problem that can be solved overnight. Is there a realistic attitude in these communities that maybe there's not a bad motive, but just simply the reality is that it's very difficult times for everybody?
Well, it is. That's true. But I will also point out, and this is statistically known, it's too well known, the blacks and Hispanics are the first to be fired and the last to be hired. Now, we can't keep running a country with a racial bias, even within the hiring policies of our own corporate world and our own business communities all over this country, and then sit back and claim, well, it's a bigger problem than that because there's also white unemployment. You don't understand. It's 80% unemployment for the black youth, 80%. And these people are not illiterate. That is a myth. Many of them are highly educated. Gang members I met with PhDs.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about the media. That's what we started this program with. What can the media do? What did they do in Los Angeles? We've answered some of those questions. Now the question is, what can the media do in the future to collectively help to resolve these problems rather than divide us? We'll come right back. Stay with us.
This summer, West greets East. When I work with metal, I try to use all possible properties of the material. In the process, I warm or heat the metal, fuse it, cut it, bend it. Since all metals are different, it is essential that you know their properties well. Visit Prosnik and see the Russia you've never seen.
Come on, Betty. Make my meal. These scalloped potatoes, so creamy, piping hot, real Idaho russets. I like them a lot.
Betty's Easy Scalloped, the potatoes that make the meal.
Fettuccine Alfredo. So soon?
Skillet Chicken Helper. My skillet, my chicken, my helper.
Skillet Chicken Helper makes a great meal.
In no time at all.
The media play a major role in the perceptions we have across this country about problems such as those that happened in Los Angeles. What role can the media play to help overcome those problems and to create understanding among people, Craig? What can the media do? You've been involved in it. You've seen it from both sides. Tell us what you think we ought to do.
I think the first thing reporters, anchor people, just media people in general really ought to have done a long time ago is to educate themselves about major geopolitical and local issues affected by the geopolitical. By understanding the greater issues, like the drug and crime bills, how they're affected, the consequences of this law and order mentality we've got, when you understand it, then your perspective will change as an anchorman or a reporter. You won't just blindly go down and say, wow, look at all these ignorant black people looting. You'll have a better feel for the nature of the problem. Then they can communicate with the community better. Right now, there's no communication between the media and the people.
August 1st, you're giving a lecture where you'll show the entire videotape segments of which we saw today, right?
Right. It'll be August 1st at Doubletree Suite. You have to contact my offices for the specifics.
The Doubletree Suites Hotel in the Seattle area.
Right.
Craig, as we go forward, do you believe we can solve the problem? Very quickly.
Maybe.
Are you optimistic?
I'm more optimistic than I was a while ago, but I've become more and more pessimistic in the last few weeks.
We'll follow it. All of us need to stay involved. It's a nationwide problem, not just selective problems. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you soon.